Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. This is Daily Global Insights 375 and I'm joined by my co-host Sridhar Tityaladi. Sridharji, Namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Good morning to everybody and very happy to be here.
Sir, today let us start with markets. The Dow Jones has had 14% growth, perhaps the best since 1976. What is the reason for this resurgence, sir?
The reason for the resurgence are two things. One is the early earning results showed very positive buoyancy, especially from the banking sector, the industrial sector, as well as from the booming profits that you are seeing in the energy sector. So that's the first data point. The second data point is that the GDP for the Q3 showed a surprising uptick. On an annualized basis, it showed a 2.6% growth. Remember that we have had first two quarters of the calendar year, we have had contraction. So this is the third quarter numbers that we are alluding to. So this is the reason why that there is some kind of cautious optimism, and the Dow went up, but of course S&P and NASDAQ continued to see some heavy hits, especially the tech sector took a big hit, which resulted in NASDAQ coming down, notably the Meta platform and Amazon.
And sir, 3-0, that was like a huge hit. What's the reason for such a bad show for Facebook, sir?
The reason for the bad is the diminishing ad revenue, and the numbers is obviously you have seen that the Google took a hit based on the ad revenues. To some extent, even Amazon took a hit, both on the retail sales. And so therefore, the corporates have started to pull back the expenses. So where do you have the first expenses as a result of potential headwinds is on the expenses side, so that they can give better
Tighten their belts.
Exactly.
Tighten their belts, yeah. Now, here's the interesting conundrum for the Fed. They are meeting today and tomorrow, and with an expected 0.75% raise. Do you think they'll still stick to that number, or they might tone it down?
My bet is that if they tone it down to 50 basis points, they may do a hike post-elections, post-November 8th elections, because those numbers are coming up this week. Now, why do I say that? There has been some subtle pressure put by our friends in the DC circuit, to kind of taper down and not to be so aggressive due to the inflationary situation. So, but the Fed may say, look, I got to do this, and if I don't do this, then this may get ahead of me, and then we can have disastrous consequences. But my bet is that they may stick to the 75 basis points and move forward.
And viewers, will come to India's growth story for the next year, and that looks very rosy. But first, let's take a look at what is happening in China. China's foreign minister reaches out to Anthony Blinken, and it appears that they are trying to open the diplomatic channels again. Sridharji, what exactly is going through in Xi Jinping's mind? Clearly, he cannot afford a conflict, even though we did a very detailed analysis yesterday of what are the places that he's looking at, because China, unlike Russia, and you've done a comparative analysis, the pain of war, Russia can take it because it's a net exporter. China cannot. So we talked about this. So what do you think is going on in Emperor Xi's mind?
Emperor Xi has let loose his fox diplomacy warrior loose. So the conversation was not very polite. The conversation was firm, which is effectively to say, we have to keep the communications line open. We cannot be confrontational. You need to recognize what the aspirations of China is. You have punished China with your export controls and restrictions. This is not consistent with the open trade policy and being fair and transparent to your trading partner. Yes, this is China speaking to Anthony Blinken. Let us assume this was Mike Pompeo instead of Anthony Blinken. The conversation would have been very different. But Mr. Blinken said, okay, I hear you. But let us see what we can do. And they're trying to engineer a meeting at the G20. Many people concluded that they are going to meet in G20, but let us see whether they do in G20 in Jakarta. Initial reaction from Mr. Biden was, no, I will not meet him. That was his position. But let us see what happens. So, what you're witnessing now, consistent with what we have stated, Sriji, is the wolf warrior diplomacy, which is namely exert pressure, exert pressure, exert pressure to see whether you can bring him to the table, and then do a grand dramatic scene, in that specific meeting as it happened in Alaska. Something similar what you're seeing as regards to Taiwan as well.
Sridharji, now the Chinese companies are being asked to incorporate the Xi thought. What exactly is this, sir?
The Xi thought is one nation, one rule. We always abide by the constitution and the compliance framework, and China and China and China. So this is what they're enshrining, where profit is not the motive, but the greater China and the greater benefit of the unification of China as one single most powerful nation is the objective. Now, Xi Jinping did not ask these corporations. The corporations, fearing reprisals, have chosen their own path and started to incorporate this. Very similar to what we saw in United States, where wokeism crept in when Biden took over, if you recall.
Absolutely, and we are still suffering from that. We saw how Twitter has been reorganizing. In fact, I must say that I should claim credit here. I had said that when Elon Musk's offer for Twitter had become serious, I said that Twitter will have to reduce by 50%, and he's actually thinking of reducing 75%. And I also said that Meta is going to see the same kind of effects on itself. It is also going to suffer. Same thing has happened. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I just looked at these two platforms, how they were not being very useful to the people who are advertising on them. So that was why I was saying that. Anyway, let's move on. China's third quarter GDP numbers are coming and the economy has contracted again. Sir, these guys always pad up their numbers. And even if their numbers say that you can say, okay, this, we know these numbers come from running bullet trains with no passengers. That's a known fact, right? So how bad is the contraction, sir? And how does it look going forward?
The contraction is quite bad. The economy is in a bad situation. Supply chain issues has caused hiccups. Then they have been punished by US, which is the largest trading partner, by way of import restrictions from China. And they're continuing with the zero COVID policy, which is hurting China even further. Now, what is the data? Anybody's guess is anybody's guess. But Chinese people and China as a nation can take the hit because they have reached a threshold point which is more than $10 trillion, the size of an economy. Their per capita is around somewhere between $10,000 to $12,000. And they have a reserve of $3.6 trillion. Yes, their debt is stupendous, but they know how to manipulate and how to manage the situation. So I think, notwithstanding all the macro and microeconomic factors, China will pursue, because we outlined what is driving Chinese agenda yesterday. And so therefore, whatever the data inside is, they're going to move forward, Sriji.
And look at India's news. India's growth is forecast to be at 7.2% with inflation at 6.8%. And India's exports are expected to hit between $470 to $480 billion, and the trade deficit to 15 billion on rising imports. Is it 15 billion or is it the number correct, sir?
150 billion, my apologies. It's 150 billion.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So lowest it came was in FY22, about 60 billion. But now with rising energy costs, it has gone to 150 billion. Sorry for the interruption, Sriji. Please.
No worries. And India's reserves now stand at 524 billion. The bigger question is India continuing to import from Russia at the same discounted price of $35 off per barrel, or has that tap been stopped?
The India continues to import oil from Russia. It is at a 35% discount. I don't know whether it is at $35 a barrel. It's around 35% discount. So if you take $85 a barrel, somewhere around that 50, $45 a barrel is where they are importing from Russia. Okay, there are also some friendly nations which are, if you recall, they went in by the External Affairs Minister, Energy Minister. They went all around the world, including Caribbean, to source. So they're managing that. But the fact is that it has risen, because in the early years the average was around $25 to $30. Now even at discounted, you are around $50.
Now, so, Sridharji, India has an achieved export target of about 2 trillion, and this something that they are wanting to achieve by talking to Gulf Cooperation Council and other places. The bigger challenge I see for India, sir, is that they need to reduce this import number, which is $150 billion, because in 3 months this 524 will be wiped out.
I think that let's be fairly pragmatic about this, which is namely to say that they're not going to draw down from the reserves to fund the kind of the deficit. They will always have trade credits. They will roll the trade credits over and manage the balance sheet fairly effectively. Remember that if you get it something now, that you're not going to be paying, and you have somewhere between 90 days to 120 days credit before you kind of make the payment. So they will manage that to the extent of managing the way the trading partners allow. In a competitive environment such as what we face today, I think they will get that type of what you call as the credit to overcome this deficiency, the trade deficit issue, especially around the rupee to whatever is the trading currency is concerned. Predominantly, I think it is in the dollar domain, because the top three trading partners are United States is a big trading partner. United States actually is the number one trading partner, where India is net surplus, whereas in the case of trade surplus, whereas in the case of China, it's a huge trade imbalance between India and China. Now, with regard to your question that they'll wipe out these reserves, the reserves will not be called. Reserves were used, if you recall, for the purpose of some of the currency, what you call currency protection that they needed to do. And Indian rupee is already at 83. And as I mentioned before, we could very well go down to 85 rupees because of the appreciating currency that we are seeing. So once upon a time, if you recall, that the reserves were around 650 billion. Some of the reduction in the reserves is also due to the net currency calculation, which is when you take a look at what the rupee, so naturally when the rupee value goes up, then you're going to see some imbalance in terms of the valuation of the reserve value. So my bet is that India will manage this. Well, when they're managed with same kind of deficits around, with a $250 billion, kind of FX reserves, they will manage with this 530, 540. So the only thing is the domestic economy must continue to thrive, and second, the capital infusion must happen, and credit expansion should happen. Apparently, credit expansion is happening in the MSME sector, and the government, by virtue of the PLI programs, continues to invest. So there's some external capital kind of coming in. But let us wait and see how well this is sustained, Sriji.
And Taiwan's deputy economic minister is going to be in India for their annual talks. But bigger question that I have, Sridharji, is India opened a new export avenue, and that is of refining crude. Is this now becoming a significant part of India's export as a percentage, or is it still too small?
No, it's a very significant percentage. I think it is pretty close to, I think if I recall, maybe we discussed it offline. One day we'll present these numbers.
Yes.
It's somewhere around 30%, I think, is now from almost close to zero. And all this has happened somewhere between 2015, 2016. We can actually show you a curve where first the ONGC reserves were established and India started to drill and do refining inside. But again, I give credit to Modi and Trump. It was the Trump policy which said, don't buy Brent. I'll give you the West Texas Intermediate crude. You refine, but when you refine, you export it on my behalf, and I'll give it to you at a concessional price. So this is what that particular period that kicked off. Remember, 35% of the refining was privatized, and I think it is in the hands of Reliance and probably Adani Group and some other people, in addition to the public sector undertakings. This particular chart relates to markets, which is to show that the Dow gained 14% in, which is the highest gain in the month of June since month of October since 1976. Sorry.
Funny, Sridharji. We started a few minutes late because I was trying to get these charts up, and then I forgot to put them on. So at least better late than never. So these are the Dow numbers. Just walk through them, sir, and then we'll go back to our regular news.
Yeah, program. Despite the Dow being growing 14%, yesterday was October 31st it was down 128 points. The Nasdaq was down 114 points, and S&P was down 29 points. But still, I think my bet is that S&P may finish around 3,900. Nasdaq is unpredictable. I think the biggest derailer in Nasdaq has been the two companies, which is Amazon and obviously Facebook. Facebook is. I don't know. I mean, you probably know much better than myself, which is, are they kind of dumping Facebook and going to Meta, so they're going to allow that thing to die? Or Elon Musk is waiting to buy that platform as well and combine Twitter and Facebook into one entity and relaunch with a non-woke model?
Sir, Facebook is passé because the younger generation is only using Instagram, and now the extreme elements or thinkers are looking at sites like 4chan, which nobody is even talking about. Some of the most radical thoughts are being expressed there. Also, Telegram is being used. So we are having a huge scattering. Snap might perhaps fold. I mean, we can do a separate episode on just the future of social media companies. But I'm more interested in the other one, that is that India's export story of importing crude and turning around and exporting refined oil. Because see, we are not all gloom and doom. We want to show there are some bright spots in India's growth story. Pharma is another bright spot. So let us have that talk, sir, where we talk about the rise of India's crude exports. Now let's move on to the next topic. Sridharji, I just wanted to ask you the in EU. Now, EU is asking for similar access to US market as Canada and Mexico. This is basically the NAFTA, right? And to remove some tariff constraints. However, EU has some of the highest tariff constraints when it comes to imports also, right? I mean, isn't it a two-way street?
It is a two-way street. In fact, there's data privacy, data protection laws. Their agricultural products are protected because farming is very big. Their manufacturing products, they want to be opened up. Their energy products and clean tech products to be opened up. And United States is saying, no, you got restrictions there. So for that, I'm not going to allow, it's a quid pro quo. So I think this is what you're beginning. But EU is struggling. Again, we had... there's only so much we can cover in a short window of time. Euro, the inflation went through the roof at 10.9%. So they're struggling. The economy is struggling, which is what made Olaf Scholz to running all the way. We'll cover that later this week on November 5th. He will be in China discussing how we can work together. One important data point since it came up, why Hamburg was given away. Interestingly, Olaf Scholz was the mayor of Hamburg when this deal was done between China. So he said, I have to do the deal. You Greens and you liberals, walk away. If I don't do the deal, then I'm going to have Rotterdam and I'm going to have other ports, claim this, and I'm going to lose the deal. So you have this competitive play which allows intrusion to occur at a competitive disadvantage. So therefore, I think that the EU is pleading, with United States. I mean, that was a side distraction, but I just wanted to introduce the data point. But EU is pleading with United States to say, we have NATO, so all you need to do is introduce an F and take out the O and add A or E. So then you have North Atlantic and European Trade Organization. So therefore, then we can be the mother of all things. We can have defense pacts, we can have trade pacts, we can have seamless. You are anyway allowing illegal people to come in. Please allow also Europeans to come in and go as you please from European Union point of view. So all things are going to open up, Sriji, in the next 2 years of Mr. Biden.
Sir, I read somewhere that up to 218 ships of Ukrainian origin have been denied access to flow through the Black Sea and creating a wheat export problem situation down the road. Now, we don't know whether it is Russia or whether it is Turkey which is doing that. So I would like your input quickly on that, sir. But more importantly, Russia is continuing to strike Ukraine with missiles, and now some of them are beginning to land in Moldova, the neighboring country. We're going to put up the chart for that one, sir. Let's first talk about that, and then we'll talk about the other thing, which is Ukrainians' wheat exports.
So what happens is, I don't know where the Russian rockets, they're probably coming from the Crimean Peninsula, okay, attacking those areas. Remember, in Moldova, there is a border area which is troublesome, which is, anti kind of Russian, Transnistria. And so what happens is, I don't know that particular, whether there or somewhere from which Ukrainians are having a missile defense or drone defense mechanism. So some of these missiles which are getting blocked by the Ukrainians is actually now spilling into Moldova. So why we have put up this and why making this point is, this could very well spill, because if Belarus becomes a launch pad, it could also go into Poland. So we are now beginning to see this slowly lose control as Russia steps up its momentum to actually resolve and prosecute this war in Ukraine, and they've not been able to successfully do it. The reason Russians say is, it was British and Ukrainian, British intelligence and British commandos helping the Ukrainians, which resulted in some of the attacks that take place in Crimea, which is the reason why they have blocked the ships. They have said the United Nations border deal is off the table because we have no security guarantee for the Crimean region. Remember, Crimea and the Melitopol and the Kharkov, the adjacent southern regions have all now been taken. So Ukrainians are trying to fight, and this fight is basically, the gray area that you see. That is the area of contention. So you have the Crimea region, and that is under attack, so which spills into Black Sea. So Russia is saying off the table. Why you said 119 ships are getting delayed? The 119 ships are getting delayed because you got to have a 4-party assessment coordination mechanism to allow the ships through. Who are the 4 parties? United Nations, Turkey, Ukraine, and Russia. So if Russia says no, then there has to be a mechanism to enforce. And who is the enforcer of this? Turkey. Turkey is considered the arbiter of the ships going through the Black Sea. So they're saying, Russia, bad luck. We are going to allow some of the Ukrainian ships to go through. In anticipation, there are going to be delays. Now the wheat prices have started to grow, and we will show those numbers in the Sunday show of the market update. So this is why the ships are stranded, because unless they are vetted and granted permission by this 3-member group, they will not pass it. They will not pass through.
On a larger picture, bigger picture, Russia feels that it is critical for it to have some presence to the west of the Dnipro River. Viewers, I have done a special monologue on Dnipro River, how important it is for Russia that it have some footprints on the west edge. And if that goes away, then a lot of the Russian army troops are going to be in big trouble. And that is becoming more and more the point now of contention, especially in the Kherson region. Do go back and look at that. We're going to try and see if we can look up the link and put it in the description section so you can go back and refresh your memory. Dnipro River, very important. Next one is to look at the US news. Viewers, we are coming 1 week within the elections now, so we will have some election coverage from tomorrow in more details as things come down to the last line, to the finish line. Now, President Biden is proposing a windfall energy tax to try and show that he is taxing the energy companies. Now, that is one side. The diesel is having its own problem. First of all, there is shortage, and then even the supplies are not able to go through for various reasons. Sridharji, please touch on this. Why is this artificial problem being fostered on America? Why are they doing this self goal?
Um, when you have a CEO in a company who has no control on the operational nuances of the company, then the company faces dire consequences. The whole Colorado region and many of the rivers, most notably Mississippi River, which is a big river for transportation, is in drought. The water levels have come down. We have a diagram we actually had in one of the shows, but we couldn't get to that. But we can see the barges are unable to move. If a couple of these barges get stuck, there's no way these barges can move. They are one of the important transportation vehicles for ferrying the diesel into many parts of Central America. So that is out. So what do? They say, okay, we need to move them and see whether we can ship them by trains. Okay. And it's not that simple. And logistics and movement takes time. Now you overlay on top of that, the Motor Transport Workers Union have announced strike, and they will not be moving these vehicles at a speed that the nation needs. So effectively, you have diesel, but you can't move, and you cannot move all of them by trucks. If you have to move all of them by trucks, then you need more diesel to funnel these trucks to ferry this diesel across. So we have now created not only a logistical problem, we have not even managed our logistics of transportation adequately in the most important river system in United States, that's Mississippi.
Now, viewers, we have been talking about elections, midterm elections. In a few hours, we are going to air another episode where we are going to introduce to you a new website for Indian American voters, their numbers, what are their perspectives, how much they can influence the 2022 elections, because that will explain why suddenly Kamala Harris has embraced her Hinduism, Joe Biden has a Diwali party in his backyard, and so on and so forth. So there is a reason for all this, and you will know by watching that episode. Don't miss it. It's going to air in a few hours. And more importantly, on other global news, as Iranian protests continue, the United States is now appearing to walk back on the nuclear deal with Iran. Brazilian President Bolsonaro refuses to accept the verdict, and he thinks that the elections may have been rigged. Lastly, in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu coalition thinks that it is just one seat short of a majority. So just wrap these things together, and then we'll call it a wrap.
Well, I think that the Iranian situation is flaring up. So basically the world is now refusing to accede, but Iran has already formed a partnership with China, Russia, and probably India is also a partner in its own way, India-Iran partnership. So nothing is going to happen. They don't care about the nuclear. They may do their own surreptitious. Bolsonaro is a very interesting one. Let us see what he comes out today. But I will be shocked and surprised. Which is not, I'm actually shocked and surprised that Lula has got back into power. What exactly has been the underlying current behind it? We need to kind of look into it. And then finally, I think, remember we discussed Mr. Netanyahu. Well, he make it. He's still popular, but he's still one seat short, which is namely he doesn't have a majority of his own. I wish he comes back because the reason is he's very much needed to balance the West Asian region. He's also a very important ally of India, and he could give a lot of trouble and headache to Mr. Biden.
Absolutely, and we all know that Modi can work with anyone, so that is a good thing about the Modi administration. And Sridharji, as always, a pleasure having you on our program. Today's episode ran a little long because we are catching up with 2 or 3 days of news. Tomorrow again will be updated. It will be a short and sweet one. Thank you very much, sir. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.